And just to give a short plug-in for our next lecture. So our next lecture next month is going to be Ben Stewart, who studies how different countries have adapted open science policies, particularly with regards to publication. Yeah, okay, so today we're going to have two GYA alumni present. They're both experts in their field. So first we're going to have Maral Dadvar, who is a science manager at the Technical University of Darmstadt in Germany. She is really interested in natural language processing, which is very important to models like GPT. And she's going to give us, a sort of introduction, I guess. And then we're going to have Nova, and she is a professor of, computer science at North-South University in Bangladesh. So both very active members of GYA when you were active members, and now you each, I guess, have gone into your own organization committee. So I know that Nova is still a part of the National Young Academies in Bangladesh, and Maral, you were part of the scientific excellence group, let me just, I have some new participants to add. And so I'm gonna pass the baton to you guys, and I'm very curious to see what you have to say about ChatGPT and open science.
So ChatGPT and open science. I would like today to talk very briefly about ChatGPT, because it's a very vast area and anything can be relevant and considered part of this new technology. But first I would like to again point out that this is not about only the technology behind ChatGPT, because I think this is too technical. But I thought that this could be a good venue that we have a discussion around this ChatGPT, and not only this one particular application, but in general, we can say technologies, applications that make use of GPT technology in general, because that is the main point of this application. And like any new technology that comes into the play, at first there are many resistance toward it, many agreements, disagreements around it. And in my opinion, there is never a right or wrong idea or opinion about the technology, because all of them can be right and wrong at the same time. There is always certain advantages, certain benefits in every technology that comes to play, and at the same time there are the downsides and disadvantages and the concerns that are around that technology. So I think that this should be considered as a whole, and we should consider all aspects, and we should see really how we can be affected with this new technology. And ChatGPT is just an example. We have similar platforms such as UChat, Google Bard, or Bing AI Chat, or these are all more or less same as ChatGPT. So we are here. We want to talk about the technology and this idea and concept in general, and not just limited to that. So today I will very briefly like to just touch upon some key features of ChatGPT and what they are, its impact on science communication and the scientific research in general, its impacts specifically on natural language processing research area, and how it has affected the education, or how it can be used for education, pros and cons, and at the end, of course, the ethical issues that is always the main concern for everyone. So I will start by the key features that basically what are the main attributes and what makes the ChatGPT in general. So the new features that ChatGPT or this technology has greatly affected natural language processing in general. And it allows to generate a natural language responses basically in a human-like format and in a way that a human would respond and would interact. It uses generative models, which means that it is designed to generate natural language responses based on the input or query that it receives in any format that can be. It uses unsupervised learning models. That it means that it doesn't need in order to be able to generate those responses, it doesn't need to be trained on a very explicit, structured and labeled data. And it also uses deep learning training models, which is mostly neural network models. And it's also contextual understanding. This means that it can be adapted to different contexts and it can identify the context of the text that it was input to the platform, and also it is desired to receive the response from. Also, the large training data set that it uses and has been used to train ChatGPT, I think is one of the most significant characteristics of this platform, because the data is enormous and it's still growing, and basically it still uses all the conversations that are generated along the way as it's added training data to continue on top of that. And it has the human-like responses that, as I said, one of the, I would say, fascinating characteristics of GPT platforms are how we would communicate together, and that makes it more understandable and more pleasant for humans to use and to get engaged with. And fine-tuning, which it means that it can be fine-tuned and adapted to specific tasks and applications that we have in mind, and the responses that are generated can be tailored to specific needs that we have in mind. So very briefly, these are the key features that are used in ChatGPT to perform, basically. Now, how ChatGPT can be used in science, in scientific research, let's say in general. And as I said earlier, it had a great impact on natural language processing line of research, as well as machine learning and in general artificial intelligence. So it can be used for data generation, first of all, which is always a key requirement for any NLP related task. And it can be used to basically produce synthetic data. So for the tasks that real world data is not available, this can be an alternative for generating the data that we need for our task. Also, it can be used for text classification, which can be again fine-tuned for text classification related tasks, such as identifying scientific articles or finding relevant research questions. So any basically task that requires such identification and classification. And also it can be used to model and to analyze scientific language, such as technical terms or basically anything that can help researchers to better understand the textual information, let's say, that are required for their line of research, which again can be diverse. And it can be also extended to generating scripts and so on, but we won't go there. I mean, we don't want to talk about all the abilities of ChatGPT, but more in general how it can be utilized, let's say, for scientific tasks or requirements. Then is the summarization. That is, I would say, one of the, again, useful facilities that it provides, let's say, for the researchers, because it can give the researcher a summarized a summary of all the scientific articles, again, or all the available reports, all the available blogs. So basically a summary of all the resources that can be used by scientists, by researcher for a specific field. So it's very concise and at the same time broad. So that's, again, another benefit. And it can also help with the knowledge discovery. That I think that's maybe a continuation of the previous point, that it can identify certain patterns, certain sources, certain relationship, or specific data resources that can be used or have been used in previous articles and can be related to what we are looking for. So it will give us the ability to have a broader knowledge discovery, again, for our own purposes. And last, I would say, is the collaboration and communication, and which means that it gives or facilitates the collaboration among researchers in a more easier context. And of course, the distant or long distance collaborations is something that has been already settled. So we were not waiting for ChatGPT to come, but again, that's something on top of the existing tools that can facilitate and help the long distance collaborations. And the communication, again, is that it can help with producing the reports, short summaries, writing blogs, and basically easier communicate our research finding and outcomes. And as I said earlier, one of its most significant impacts was on natural language processing, and both ways is also the key component behind it. So specifically how it has influenced natural language processing and how it goes both ways. I would say it's on the 4 main domains. Again, it is very fast. It's not limited to this, but maybe these are the most encompassing domains that we can bring together. So first of all, it has improved language understanding, and the ChatGPT has demonstrated that large-scale language models can be effective in understanding natural language and also identifying the context. So it has greatly impacted in that area, and it has led to advances in natural language understanding and the communication in research. It has also enhanced the conversational interfaces and has generated natural language responses that can be improved for also interfaces such as chatbots or virtual assistants. So it can be used, so the technology behind it can be used beyond just the textual chat that we can see here. And also it is automated content generation. That is the whole idea behind ChatGPT, and can be used to, again, automatically generate NLP content. And it can be used, for example, now much easier to produce news article descriptions, summarization, and so on. That all of these used to go to more laborious, I would say, technical procedures before we could get there. And again, one of the most common NLP applications, which is the language translation, and ChatGPT also has facilitated the translation of among all different languages, and the machine translation systems in general, and how it can help us with the translation of the languages in general. So overall, I would say that the ChatGPT has facilitated the human-like interaction, has generated natural language responses and understanding in a more easier and vaster context, to summarize. And because of being close to human language, it has been also very quickly and widely adopted in different contexts and application and for different usages. And before I come to the ethical issues that, of course, there is also for research and scientific research, I would like to also briefly explain that how it has affected the education, or how it can be used in education. So I would say the pros of ChatGPT or similar technologies for education is that it provides a sort of personalized environment based to the needs of the students, and any student can use it as they find fit to their own personal requirements. Then this is accessibility, that it provides access to a wide range of resources to the students that might not have access to all of those resources, but just through ChatGPT, they can basically gather all that information from different resources. The convenience is there, so it is a 24 hours, 7 days a week available there. It can be easily talked to. It can the students can easily ask their questions. They don't have any office hours, so it is easy to communicate with that. And it is also very engaging for the students, as I think it's also for adults, not only students. It is easy to communicate with. It is easy to put your questions in any format and context without also having the the worry that you might have in a class in public in front of others, that how you're going to formulate your problems. And it can be also cost effective, no human involved, no from the education end, I mean. And yeah, so it can be used maybe for providing free feedback or information. So it is also cost effective. These are the pros for the education side. And then the negative perspective or side is that it lacks the human interaction. That while it can be comforting, but that's also its downside, that they don't get to have the interaction with the human that they need. It is limited in scope. It doesn't cover all the knowledge domains that are required for the students. Its accuracy is not always as high as it should be, and it can provide wrong answers that are not always what it should be. Then there are the ethical concerns, that how it will access the private information of the students, how it will affect basically their private information, and also what information it will provide to them, that maybe it wouldn't be appropriate for a student to read those content. And then there's also last the technical challenge, that not everyone can be as experienced and technology savvy to be able to use this technology. Although it seems to be simple, but still, depending on the age range that we are talking about, it can be hard to really use it in the way that can be useful for them. Yeah, so now I would like to, after all the benefits that we discussed, let's say, about the GPT technology in general, also briefly talk about the ethical issues or concerns that we should be aware of and we should consider when using the technology. So one is bias and fairness. Bias is a problem that we already have in the training data sets that are used in science and in research. So bias in training data is nothing new, or it's not specific to ChatGPT, but it's a problem that has been extended to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT basically uses the training data that we have fed into it. So the bias can be there, and the outcome can be skewed towards center gender group or ethnicity or any group that has been the major focus of the training data. So it is biased. It can the outcome and therefore can be unfair basically, and we should be always be aware of the this bias and objectivity of the data that we might have there. As I mentioned earlier, the outcome can be inaccurate. So inaccuracy is one of the main concerns here, because at the same time, the user doesn't have the ability to always identify the inaccuracy. It receives some answers that looks good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always accurate. And then is the lack of context. While ChatGPT can consider the context and can identify the context, but it cannot always provide the context that is needed because it is limited in the domain knowledge. And the limitation also provides the lack of the context. And providing the training data, the training of the models, all these can be costly, and all the basically effort behind it, and all the effort and all the resources that are required for ChatGPT, that can be costly. There is the privacy and security issue that again I touched upon earlier. That's something that it's still not fully addressed, that how it is dealt with, and how basically it's used to generate and analyze sensitive data, what is stored, what is not, and what can be accessed later on. So that is something that when we are giving a data or receiving a data, that's something that we should always be aware of. And the last is the misinformation and disinformation. And so ChatGPT can be used for generating misleading or false information. So, and it can be also trained based on false information. So, and it can have, serious consequences if we really rely on this for our research or for, really using its result for the task that we have in mind. And so as the next steps, I would say that for sure there will be more work on providing more advanced models, on generating more sophisticated responses. So it's a never-ending process, in my opinion, and it can always be more accurate, wider, and better. And also it can be used for more wider range of applications other than what we already discussed. And also all the ethical concerns that I just mentioned earlier are things that should be addressed, will be addressed, and it's something that can, the more concerns are resolved, I think that it brings more acceptability in the society. So that is something that I think that a great deal of work is being dedicated to it. But at the very last, in my opinion, take-home message or sentence, I would like to say that any technology should be used in an informed way. So in my opinion, it's always the user's responsibility to know what they are using. And we can never expect the technology to cover all the concerns and aspects that are necessary in human mind and in human lives. And at the end of the day, it's just a tool. And they are a tool, they are tools that should be used to facilitate our life in general. But at the same time, we should be aware and informed on how to use them to not make them harmful to our lives. So yeah, thank you. I would like to stop here. And I'm sure Nova can continue with other aspects that I missed to cover in my presentation. And I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Maro. So if anyone has any urgent questions, they can put them in the chat. And otherwise we can go on to Nova, and then we can have questions, like a more extended question and answer session at the end. So going once.
Yeah, so I will actually go for a more childish version of ChatGPT. So it's more like if my daughters are going to teach me what ChatGPT is or how it works, that will be the perspective. I know we have all global young academy scientists, so we have all the cool people here, but I would like to play more of a layman here. So what I did is I had a lot of fun making the slides, so the horrible drawings are mine. So don't mind. So what is ChatGPT? We know it's like a chatting tool. We can chat to it, we can talk to it. And it was a very fascinating thing for me because I used to see my daughter playing and talking to Siri on my mobile phone a lot when she was home alone. And the chatbots are actually the first one to pass the Turing test. So if you are aware of what a Turing test is, like Turing test is the computer science test that is the ultimate AI test that people believe. If you can make someone believe that that computer is a human being, then you actually pass that Turing test. And through a chat conversation, the first chat conversation convinced people that it was an 8-year-old boy. So that's how we actually then came all this conversation, like rise of AI, destroying humanity, all those things started. So when we're talking about a chatbot, it seems pretty simple, but what's so amazing about it is that the chatbot is built up on all our data. So it behaves just like us. It was trained using all the internet-based data. And so when you ask a question, it answers more of like a human. So because it has so much data of us. And what I mean was it takes everything from the internet. So initially when they trained the bot just based on data available on the internet, it was exactly the way internet behaves towards us. It was toxic, it was sexist, it had all the negativity internet shows to us. So what happened at that time? So if you look at the cartoon, because it's an AI-based tool, if you know about how AI works, it's more of a statistical tool. So it will be based on very sophisticated statistical technique. So if majority is saying something, no matter what it is, it will actually be biased towards that data. So that's where we are concerned about. So because it's biased towards that, and the initial version of ChatGPT turned out to be so negative, so sexist, so racist, it had all the bad things the internet had. So there was a requirement that we have to label the data. It's not only data, but we have to tell about the data, that this data is bad, the data is good, this is sensitive. So this is all we are actually teaching about the data itself. But the problem concerns about how that training took place. So there was lots of criticism about it itself that we should be knowing about and we should actually be aware of, because it was a Kenyan-based company that got the job to label the data. And the people who were labeling the data used to get less than $2 per hour. And it was hours of data. Many of it was, for example, child pornography, disturbing elements on the internet, very horrific, very extreme video content. And there are articles about how traumatized the people who label the data is. So it's also, we are using the tool, but we need to know the story behind it, because otherwise we won't be making the right decisions in the future when we are talking about the next amazing tool. It cannot be through the cost of our emotion, our lives, or mental health. So And when we looked at the GPT data, I have actually, I have put all the links here. So there is an example of one of my students tried to search a research paper based on depression and mental health, and ChatGPT right away gave you answers. So why we love it so much? It's a search tool that just gives you one answer rather than giving you options of answers. So it gave us 3 research papers, and all of them looked so real, but they did not exist. So it had very good names and author name and also a DOI number. But yes, but it's getting better. So yeah, it's a picture that somebody got a 0 out of 100 because it gave all the fake data. So because we are labeling it and we are trying to teach it to be nice and gentle, so the chatbot, so here is an example. It asked a joke about a woman and it said, no, I cannot answer that. And you ask a joke about a map, it answers right away. It just gives you a joke. So when you are making it overly cautious and overly sensitive, so again, there is the concern. Is it being fair? Can I never have a question, never have a joke about women that is not degradatory, that is not bad, but it's just funny and fun. So those things are there. I think over the time when we play more with it, have more research on it, things will get better, but these are the current concerns we have. So we had lots of fun asking ChatGPT to write poetry in a style of a Bengali poet, poetry in a style of Shakespeare. So it looks like it's all fun, it's all good. We can play around with it. But like Maral was telling us, because ChatGPT is giving us information about internet, what if we are talking about the people who do not have strong voices over internet? For example, the minority community, the community who are in danger, the community who can, if they put their identity on internet, they can be, because for example, in Bangladesh, one person from LGBTQ community declared himself part of this community. The next day he was murdered and by an extremist religious group. So that group does not have voice over the internet. So how do we get the best information about that person? So it's always about that. Apart from the data itself, again, because we are part of the open science group, the major question comes, because these tools are so sophisticated, it's run by so many computers, it has such an enormous amount of data. What if this whole data is used, my data is used to manipulate myself? Because it knows so much that it can give me something that I will be totally biased at. And so these are the things, because it's using internet's data, should we allow it to use the open data? Who owns the data? Do I get the ownership of my data? Those things are the challenging questions. And the major concern comes from the ethical perspective. When we are asking someone to give us generate a result, generate sophisticated result that's good enough to start with, that's good enough to, that's logical enough through the calculative threads, how do we make sure it's not working on behalf of something evil, something, why not, because it's using all the data right now, rather than allowing it to use the data and be so powerful, shouldn't we be working on the rules, how and where to use it, how and where to start and how and where to stop it? Because before it's too late, we will be depending a lot more on these tools. So that's where the concern comes in. So that's why I don't want us to be all experts on ChatGPT. Rather, I want us all to have that critical question in mind. So what are the critical things we should think about to make sure we are not building up a monster that's coming against us? Because it can spread because we are asking so many questions, and the more we ask questions, the more it's getting data from users, like what type of questions are coming, right? Because it's constantly learning and constantly adding up to its knowledge base. So the more we use it, it's getting more and more sophisticated. It's learning about our emotions, learning about our strategical questions. But what if we don't have the ethical barriers beyond it? And the ethical concerns, some of the countries have very strong ways of protecting user data. Like in Europe, there's GDPR, but in countries like Bangladesh, we don't have laws protecting our data. So if our data is being manipulated, large amount of data, large amount of scientific data that's open source and it's out there for research purpose, and it's being manipulated and used up by some chatbot, we have to be really careful about where and how it's being used and where we should put that barriers. And because some countries are behind in science and technology compared to the other countries, I think this is a very good time and very good conversation to have, so that we can, as scientific communities, we can work together and ask the critical questions all together, beyond the borders. And yes, because we need to protect the minorities, no matter where that minority is. It can be based on your racial profile, it can be based on your location, it can be based on the current situation, the political situation. It can be based on so many things. So yes, so I wanted, so yes, we need to set the ethical guidelines, because it's not too far that I don't know whether it's me talking to you or a chatbot looking like Nova talking to you. And we don't know how and where to put the boundary. So it's like a very good time to think about it. And making sure, because it's a tool, like Maral was telling us, we have to be very, very careful about making sure that the tool doesn't come and get us. So yes, and I also wanted to thank my research team. We played a lot with ChatGPT before we made the slides. So yes, that's it. Yeah, I did not go through very details of anything. I just, I think my one is lighter than Maral's one. It's more of a lighter version of ChatGPT, maybe ChatGPT Lite. Thank you very much.